Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. It is a Stashing with Stephanie Day, and that's where we come out with a brand new fat quarter friendly pattern that I've designed just for you that features this month's collection that has gone out to all of our Stashing with Stephanie subscribers. Now, if you're not a subscriber, you can still get the pattern and you can still get a kit, but you don't get first dibs on it. So that means that sometimes things are sold out. Some of the favorite prints are gone. So the best way to make sure you don't miss out is to join the club. And then you also get access to all of our Stashing with Stephanie patterns for free. And you get 30% off all of my fat quarter friendly books, fat quarter patchwork quilts, and fat quarter workshop. And you also get 20% off all of your additional Stashing with Stephanie fabric. So not only do you get a discount on the fabric bundle that's sent out to you each month, you also, if you want to get additional fabric so you can turn that bundle into a quilt kit, you save on that. You save on additional yardage for your backing, or just if you really like the collection and you want to get some extra. So it's a great club to be a part of, especially if you are looking to continue quilting while staying on a budget, because that's what we are all doing at this point in time. And you're going to get the best modern quilting lines delivered to your door each month. So great club to be a part of. I'm really excited about this month's design. It's called Hugs All Around. So we're making an O block, but Cotton+Steel, which is one of the ones that we featured today, they really adhere to like that traditional screen printing thought of we're going to come up with 5 prints and we're going to do it in 3 colorways, and then each print you can get in 3 different colorways. And so what I did was I grouped it into sets of 5 for the colors that were available, and then from there you're just going to use each color per block. So there's going to be one that's more of this mustard yellow that's kind of like my shirt, and then there's this maroon kind of peach salmon one, and then there's a blue which we're going to be making on camera. So you're going to make this really fun block. It really utilizes the color and the different values all together. We're going to have a scrappy background utilizing the lightest prints, and so it really is going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to look like a very scrappy quilt, but we're going to be able to use all of one collection to do it. So that's really fun. You can grab the pattern over on our website, and we're going to get to the tutorial in just a second, but first we're going to take a look at this month's fabric. So Chelsea Eckberg of On the Mark Designs designed this month's collection. It's really fun and it's very rich in color, which I really appreciate. I think it's going to be great going into fall, but it does have some floral, so it definitely could work in other seasons as well. This is one of the prints that we're going to be using as a scrappy background in this month's collection. It's just a little flower petal going all over, and it really works to kind of tone it down. We're going to have our darkest fabrics next to it, so that way it really is going to pop against it. Here we have some yellow cone flowers just kind of floating around in the wind. It's really a small detail print. It's going to allow the eye to be pulled elsewhere. We're going to use this as our medium value print that's going to be close to the center. This flower is really fun, and we are going to use this in the dead center of our block. I really love how this works out, and when I made mine, I didn't fussy cut the flowers, but I did plan my cutting so that way I would make sure that my larger strip that is going to go in the center was going to have the flower somewhat in the center, and that allowed me to be able to have this look really good and like I planned it to be, perfectly centered, when it was really just a little bit of mindful cutting, and it worked out really well. This wave is really fun. It's just the 2-color design. Again, it's one of those where it's not a lot happening, so it's going to help draw your eye to the blocks that are more striking, like the flower over here. We're going to use this as our medium dark, and this is going to be strip piece, and it's going to be against that background, so it's going to just really pop. Mushrooms are a thing again, and we have a little forest with a few mushrooms in it. It's really a fun print. It is directional, but I'm going to show you how to plan it when you are getting your corners of your block ready to make sure that everything is always pointing up. But if you don't worry about those things, that's totally fine. They can go any which way too, and that would be absolutely all right. All right, so we have now seen all of the prints that are part of the collection Clara Jane. We're going to go through it in the additional colorways as well, so you can get a look at it. But that's kind of how I grouped it, is I have one of each print per colorway, and then that will make a set of 3 blocks for every set of 5 fat quarters. So I'm going to show you the rest of them, and then we're going to get to sewing. Here is the kind of peachy maroon colorway. Now we're moving into that indigo blue colorway. It is my favorite and I love it so much. That's what we're going to sew with today into this tutorial. All right, so we're going to start off with some strip piecing. This is a really great way to speed up your quilting because instead of cutting this into tiny little squares, it's going to make 4 rectangles that get sewn together, or 4 sets of rectangles that get sewn together. We're going to sew our entire strip together at one time, then we're going to cut it apart to form the units that will be a part of our block. So from one strip piece unit, we'll get enough for one block, and we'll be ready to move on to the next step, and it'll be super fast. To get started, I'm just going to lay these guys right sides together. I want to make sure that I am matching up the edges that have my selvage. Some of the selvages are super wide. That is definitely the case with Cotton+Steel. So you want to make sure they're on the same end. Otherwise you might lose like an inch on this end and an inch on this end and then not have enough to cut your strip piece units out of. So always make sure that those selvage edges are together. So I'm lining the edge of my pressed foot up with the edge of my strip. So that way I'm sewing that 1/4 inch seam all the way down. And I don't pin any of this. All I do is I lift it up and I line it up and I kind of just hold my finger right at the edge of where my sewing machine throat is and just let it come up. You don't want to tug or pull on this. Just let the feed dogs pull the fabric up. And when you can't hold it anymore, you're just going to line that up again and repeat. Now if your strips aren't the exact same length at the end, don't panic, it's going to be just fine. What I like to do here is I'm going to let my finger come all the way up to where I can't hold onto that fabric anymore. Then I'm going to put it to the side. That's going to allow you to have that nice straight corner seam all the way to the end. So next we're going to press our seams open. I press my seams open 99% of the time, but especially when I am strip piecing because otherwise it tends to kind of curve up. And then you end up having to constantly like reposition and recut your strips and you lose a lot. So this stays a lot more straight for me. What I do is I'll open that seam up with my fingertips and then you put the nose of your iron straight down the center. And as long as you keep your fingertips just ahead of the iron and sort of pre-press that open, it's gonna open real nicely for you. Now, when we look at this, we should see a nice straight line. If you see a wiggle anywhere in there, it means you have a pleat on the other side and you've got to fix it or you're going to have problems later. Now, when I'm pressing open, I like to press from both sides. So once I'm done pressing from that side, I'm also going to press straight down the center on the right side. All right, so here's where that time saving comes in. We're going to be able to cut all of our units from this strip piece unit instead of having to sew 4 separate sets of rectangles together. So it saves a ton of time. So for this first one, I like to start on the edge that does not have the selvage. And then we're going to just do our first cut. We're going to let it be a little longer than it needs to be. So here I'm going to be cutting to 4.5. I've got it coming a little bit beyond that so we can square that edge up as well. Got that trimmed. And when I'm measuring this up, I'm not just measuring to the edge here. I'm making sure that I've got an inch line going straight down that seam because that's going to ensure that everything lines up nicely when we go to sew our block together. Now that we've got our first one cut and squared up, we can just cut right down the rest of the strip until we're all done. All right, these are all done. We can set them to the side and work on our corner pieces. So we're gonna have these smaller squares. We wanna make sure that we are marking on the wrong side of those, so that way we've got a line to sew on. What you wanna do is put your ruler so that it's going from point to point on the wrong side, and then taking either a friction gel pen or a color or a mechanical pencil works too. You want to mark that line and you want to make sure that you are leaning that pen inward. If you're going straight up and down or have it out to the side, you won't truly be marking from point to point, and then I've watched enough students do this in person. You want to follow the line. You might think, oh, well, I'll just get it when I sew. You don't. You follow the line and then you end up being off, and then your piecing ends up being off. So it's important to make sure that you're leaned in so that you're going straight from point to point. So we're going to do that on the back side of all of our smaller squares. All right, so I'm pulling a finished block over just so you can take a peek at it and see where we're going with this. So what we're gonna have is these are going to be in all of the corners. And we talked earlier that this is a directional print. Now, if you do not care that all your mushrooms are pointing up, like, you can skip this whole part, just skip ahead to where I talk about sewing on the corners. That's fine. But if you do, if you want them all to be going up so that they can be pointing up and your flower can be pointing up and all your blocks can be growing up into the sun, then watch this next step. So this is what we're gonna do. We are gonna take our mushrooms and we're gonna lay them out as though they were in 4 corners with all the mushrooms going up. And then I'm gonna take my mediums and I'm going to line them up in the corner here. And that way I know that this is where this belongs on each one of these. Now, I'm not going to do anything with these yet because I've got to take all these over to the sewing machine and sew it, and I'm gonna mess that up. I'm gonna have to move it anyway. So I'm just gonna start with the mediums, just place them in place. I'm not like putting them exactly where they need to be. I'm just making sure they're in the correct corner so that they'll be pointing toward the center. That way when I go to lay this block out, I can make sure that all of my mushrooms are gonna be going up, but all of my medium triangles are also going to be pointing in toward the center of that block. So now that I've done this, I'm good to go over and take and sew on my sewing machine and sew straight down this line. I like to move my needle to the middle position to do that. It just is a little easier visually to be able to see and stay on that line. Now, as I'm placing this on my sewing machine throat, that's when I'm checking to make sure that all my edges are even and that my points are right on top of each other. You absolutely could also pin this in place if that makes it easier for you. Now, I'm sewing right on or 1 needle width to the right of where that line is. That's going to make sure my block stays where it should be and ends up the size it should be. Now you absolutely can and should chain piece these. So I'm just gonna grab my next one in my stack, get everything lined up, and work my way around sewing everything together. Now when I lay this back out, everything is still in the exact position it needs to be. All my mushrooms are still pointing up, and all of my medium corners are in the center exactly where I want them to be. So that makes the next stage really easy because all I have to do is align these in the opposite corner on each one of my blocks, and I am good to rock and roll and get this block done. Now we have to create our 1/4 inch seam. To do that, we're going to take our ruler and we're going to place our 1/4 inch mark on that seam and the line that we drew. And then you're able to cut a 1/4 inch away from your seam line, and we've created our 1/4 inch seam. Some people like to save these tiny triangles. I put them in a bin in the shop that our staff can go through. So if you don't want to feel guilty or you just don't want to use them, I guarantee you have a friend that probably would love to have these. Now we're going to press all of these seams open so our block lays nice and flat. Just like before, I open that with my fingers first and then just put the iron straight down the center. Now, when you get to this other side, the only thing you want to make sure you do is that you don't have your iron angled so that it's going across the seam that we already pressed. We want to make sure we are only getting this seam, otherwise you might press this one going the wrong way, and we don't want that. When you're all done, go ahead and press again from the front and then repeat with the others and you are ready to move on. All right, so now it's time to lay out our block pieces. Now this is going to take a little bit of finagling. I see a mushroom going up here, and now we're going up and up. So now I've got all my corner pieces back in the right position. Our mushrooms are also going up, so we're good. And we're able to put our strip piece units in to make that O. From here, we're just sewing a 9 patch, but I've got a really good tip that'll help make sure that this connects perfectly every single time. So that way you have this really nice transition to where that O is just going all around and all your points match up just so. All right, so this join here is the most important one that's going to be super obvious if it's off. So what I like to do is just flip this over and I'm going to mark a 1/4 inch in. I'm just lining up that 1/4 inch mark with the edge, and then I'm going to mark across where that diagonal seam is of where that is. So that tells me where I need to pin. So if I turn it this way, I always like to pin away from me. What I can do is I can take a pin and I can put it straight through where that seam joint is, exactly a 1/4 inch away from the edge. And so I know where I'm supposed to be. Now I can also do the same thing here. I can put that pin straight through where that seam is. Now I know you've seen me before where I like don't rock this. I do a little bit on this one because we're just going back and forth. Like that doesn't matter as much here because it's going to be on top of that seam. But I still do take a second pin and I'm going to pin next to that. So that way I'm going through the seam allowances on the back, keeping everything where it should be. Now when I sew across this, I should be hitting where this seam joint is right on top of the other seam joint, and then we get that perfect join going around that O. I'm going to repeat that with my other one on the bottom, and we're going to get this row sewn together. Now I am back to my regular 1/4 inch seam. Now we're just going to sew this together like we would any 9 patch. The only difference is that I'm going to kind of go slow until we get to where that pin is. And I'm going to sew as close as I can to that pin. Like I am fully, like that needle is in the middle of that seam allowance. So I know now that I'm good. I can remove this pin because I've gotten as close as I can to it. I'm going to have a good join. Then I can line my bottom corners up and finish. Now this is just a straight seam, so nothing special there. Just line up your corners and sew. We're going to repeat with the bottom. I like to wait to press until my entire rows are together, so I'm going to repeat all those steps, sewing the left column to my middle. All right, so I just press these open and we have to zoom in so you can see and appreciate how good these points are and why it makes sense to take the time to pin. I mean, just look at this. It goes straight out from our strip piece unit and then straight down. That is a perfect O, that is a perfect point. So I know it seems a little bit tedious to mark your point and then do the double pin, but for results like this on the first try, every single time I will do it. Every single time. So I'm going to press the rest of these and then we're going to follow the same steps of marking. We're going to mark here, so that way we can also do that double pin when we are joining our middles, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the finished block. Now the last thing I do to any block is I hit it with my spray mister. I don't like to steam in my iron because every iron I've ever put steam into eventually spits and gets my fabric gross. But I love my Oliso, so I just use the spray mister instead. It puts a fine aerosol mist over the block and allows me to get it super, super flat before I move on to piecing my quilt top together. That just looks absolutely fabulous. I love it. I'm here for it, and I don't have to gunk up my iron. All right, so we've got our 3 colorways that we originally saw when we were looking at the fabrics. We did the blue on camera, but there also is this mustardy yellow one, and then this maroon peach colored salmon-y one. I love them all. They're fabulous. 5 fat quarters will make 3 blocks. So in ours, we're gonna be doubling up. You're gonna get 2 of each fat quarter if you get the full kit, or if you get your finishing kit, if you're a member, you're going to get the 5 fat quarters you didn't get, plus another full pack, which will make your lap size. In between all of these will go some Scrappy sashing and cornerstones. So these little bits are going to be our cornerstones, and then in between we're going to have Scrappy background. So you can mix it up, have little bits of different colors all over the place. It's a fabulous way to create a scrappy look and have it be kind of a controlled scrap, because let's face it, we've all have made a scrap quilt where it looks like our staff just kind of threw up on it and there's no rhyme or reason to anything. This will allow you to really kind of have it look cohesive, look like it all belongs together, but you can still get that scrappy look. So it'll be really fun. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. The pattern is called Hugs All Around. You can get it over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. And kits and fabric while supplies last of Clara Jane from Cotton+Steel Fabrics. Again, if you join Sashing with Stephanie, you can get this pattern for free. And if you purchase the kit on your second purchase, then you will automatically get that discount and savings on fabric. Now, if you join Sashing with Stephanie this month because you saw this and you thought, I love it, I need it in my life, we have already shipped out all this fabric to our members. You will not be getting this fabric. This confuses people every single month. So most people get it, but some people don't. So what you want to do, if you really like this fabric and you need it and you want to join the club because you saw this video, is you need to purchase the kit for this. And then you will get it, you will have enough to make the lap size quilt, you will be good to go. But the next fabric that is coming is a completely different fabric, and that is what's up next. You won't be getting this. So you got to sign up by the end of the month, by the end of August, in order to get your first bundle. Will ship around the 20th of September. If you sign up September 1 or later, you're going to be waiting until around October 20th to get that shipment notification. So it's really important that you pay attention to that. It's really clearly written. We send you emails afterwards explaining the whole shebang, but every month we get people who just ignore all that and then they're mad. So don't be mad. Just listen to that. Read your email. We try to make it as clear as possible, and you will. That's why we give you the pattern discount right away, and you can get the discount on this month's kit, so you have something to tide you over until you get that first bundle. All right, until next time, happy quilting.